What's up, YouTube? This is Galactic God. I'm coming at you today with a quick little video on Yu-Gi-Oh! Proxies. I want to talk about what a proxy is, what people think of them, and what I think makes a good proxy. So proxy is anytime a player doesn't have either a hard-to-get card or just a card in general that they don't have. So let's say they didn't have a copy of Pot of Duality. They might proxy it by placing a card upside down in their deck, and then just letting the other player know that anytime that they draw this upside down card, that's their Pot of Duality. Now, a lot of people were doing this in casual gameplay when Pot of Dualities were extremely hard to get. Now they've been reprinted as a super rare, so now they're available for everybody. Everybody can get them pretty easily. Some people still might not have them, so some people are still using proxies. But that is just an example of like what a proxy actually is, and what somebody might use for it. Another kind of proxy I've seen people use is if they're using Pot of Duality, they might play a similar card in their deck, like say Pot of Generosity, and say every time they drew that would be their Pot of Duality. Similar things could be said with other cards like Pot of Greed, or perhaps maybe Greed Grotto, or something that is similar to Pot of Greed, or excuse me, Pot of Duality, and they just kind of, whenever they draw this certain card in their deck, the other player will know, okay, well, obviously they're not going to be playing Pot of Greed. That card is, forbidden, so that can't be what that card is. And nobody in their right mind is probably playing Pot of Generosity, so, that's safe to say, too. Another thing I've seen some players do, which is actually, what a lot of my buddies do as well, is they actually make a photocopy. Not really photocopy, I should say that. They print out a copy from their computer of the actual card. So when you put it right next to each other, they are pretty similar. You could definitely tell, one is, a printed copy because it is. But the other player instantly knows, like, hey, well, that is obviously a Pot of Duality in their deck. More or less. It's not a real one, but I know what that is. And you could even somewhat read the card text and everything, so if you didn't know what the card did, maybe not this card per se, but a different one, then that would work too. Another kind of example of this I've seen my buddies do is with Trishula. It's kind of a little more expensive card still. So if you have the real Trishula, you obviously know what the effect is and everything. But for someone who didn't have it, they just kind of printed out a copy on their computer and then just placed it over another card and stuck it in a sleeve. So that's a pretty good way of doing proxies, I think. Probably my favorite way is, like, let's say you have the real card, let's say a Ryza. You can get a foreign language version of the same card, usually a Korean or a Japanese version, and everything's going to look the same. The language is obviously different. I don't know if you guys can see that just right, but everybody usually pretty much knows what a Ryza does, and so when they plop this one out, you're like, oh, that's friggin', not a real Ryza. Well, it is a real Ryza, but it's not, a legal Ryza. But at home play, or friend play, that's pretty acceptable. You'll know what your friend is trying to play there. And they even can come in holographic form. So let's say, you have your Elemental Hero Shining. You can get a holographic version of it as well. That could be a proxy fake one as well. So, as you can see, I don't know if the camera can see it too well, but that's kind of what they look like. And I think these, personally, are my favorite proxies to use, because if, you instantly know what the card is, it actually is the real card, just in another language, and I think people instantly recognize that. So the next question I kind of just wanted to pose is, I've seen a lot of players really give some hate to other players who are using proxies, and I'm not sure I quite understand that. I mean, not everyone has the money or ability to locate some of these hard to get cards, or just the resources to get even cards that aren't so extremely hard to get. Maybe stuff like Ryza is not an extremely hard card to get anymore, but maybe they just don't have someone they can trade it with, or they don't have the $10 or whatever it costs for a Ryza right now. I've seen players outright refuse to play with another player that doesn't have real copies of the card in their deck. They just don't want nothing to do with proxies. If you don't have the real card, then it's not worth their time and effort even dueling you. I mean, I find that really kind of crazy. Like I was saying, not everybody has those kind of resources, and I think this is a great way for people to learn, if a certain card is going to work for them. So my question to you is, what do you feel about proxies? Do you think that using proxies is kind of acceptable? Obviously, you cannot use them in a tournament. That would be crazy. Otherwise, everyone would just proxy everything. How many proxies do you think are acceptable in a deck? I mean, especially if they're upside down, you can't obviously have, these upside down ones, or, pot of duality. Then I have another one that are flipped the other way. They're going to be solemn warnings, or whatever. Or, you guys like these kind better. What is your favorite kind of proxy to use? Or the favorite kind that you think is most acceptable? Do you think, the upside down card is good enough? Another kind of close enough version of the card is good? Do you think, the Korean or Japanese version of the card is a good proxy? Do you think the photocopied or printed out via computer style and placed over a card is a good version of the copy? And just, give me your thoughts on what you feel about proxies as well. I think it's perfectly acceptable. I don't have no problem with any player using proxies against me, as long as they make sense. I mean, obviously, something weird proxied in as something is kind of jarring, kind of, if they put in a relinquish for their pot of duality, that would be kind of odd, I think, but you get the point. Anyways, I guess that's about it for now. Let me know what you think, and this is Galactic God.